All right. Have you guys heard about this possible proposal that may have some steam to it, may have some validity to it, between the SEC and the ACC teaming up for non-conference games, matching up the 14 teams in each league and saying, hey, we're going to play one non-conference game, and that would basically shut out the Big 12 and would determine the fate of the Big 12 in regards to non-conference games, with the Big 10 and the Pac-12 already making their decisions.
What would it mean for the SEC's deal with the Southland and all the other 1AA conferences? When they came out and said that they would count up to 2 Division I FCS wins or games toward bowl eligibility, I was like, well, that's good for the Mississippi States of the world or whatnot. So, all joking aside, I think it's a good fit. I think that there's a lot of overlap in terms of SEC and ACC down in the South, where you have Clemson in the ACC and South Carolina in the SEC, and being able to get some of these, or like Georgia and Georgia Tech, to get some of those traditional type of rivalries that are out of division. As a football fan, I would love to see it. As a Big 12 fan, I would hate to see that, because, or in the Pac-12, because you have two conferences right there that, we know that we're going to have really a beauty contest if most of these schedules are either 100% or 95% within your conference. And the SEC is easily going to have one spot locked down and is going to try like heck with its advocates out there to get 2. It does create a situation where, are you going to be all that excited about watching Oregon or Washington play Arizona and Arizona State and some of these games out there, where the SEC is going to be able to maybe pick off a couple of good ACC games, at least in name only? I think it's a real good deal for both of those conferences, though.
Yeah, and it's a way to keep those end of season rivalries going. Then they'll just add a couple more, maybe something like that. Certainly helps their playoff picture. I don't think the Big Ten is thinking about the playoffs. Maybe they are today, but they haven't really been thinking about anything other than the regular season in terms of heavy duty talks. And so now that they've gotten those going, and the scheduling is probably being taken care of right now as well, they can think about the postseason and a Big Ten championship game and what that means for the playoffs. But I got the feeling from just listening to Gene Smith, like, postseason may or may not happen. It was all about the regular season. Whereas the SEC, even in their thinking about the regular season, they have playoff thoughts in mind, and this would certainly help them. Now, I think it's more about the schools keeping their favorite rivalries, but there's also a very heavy second meaning in that it helps the playoffs, and it gives them, another notch on their belt in terms of what the committee may be looking at. And if, as Kevin said, it's a beauty contest, I think maybe that's another reason why maybe make this an 8 or 16 team playoff this year, because we have no great way to decide who the best 4 teams are if there are guys missing because of sickness, if there are games being canceled, games being moved around at a moment's notice. I kind of think the players would deserve an opportunity to prove it more than just in a 4-team matchup at the end.
I'm going to be somewhat fascinated if it plays out the way Kevin, I think, was alluding to, that if you have nothing but conference games and you really want to be objective and fair about this, then you can't rate any conference above any other conference. You have to say what we assume about the SEC on the high end and the ACC or the Pac-12 on the low end. We got to dismiss that because nobody's playing each other in 2020, if that happens. And so then you got to rank all the conferences equal and then just basically determine who finishes with the best records and who finishes with the most dominant play against their conference. And so you select the 4 best records. Most likely there's going to be a tie between spots 3, 4, and 5 or something in that range. And then you've got to say, okay, who was most dominant against their own conference? Because we shouldn't assume which is the best conference if they don't play any non-conference games. Although the committee has been leaning more heavily each year on pretty much answering any controversial question with, we just select the 4 best teams.
Can we see teams? I mean, again, the big caveat that we have football where margin of victory really matters. I mean, because we're in this day and age of all these metrics and game control or whatnot. What's really easy to see, a 70-7 shellacking of a conference foe, somebody that you play every year or every couple years if it's cross division or whatnot. So it could create for some interesting situations because coming right out day one, you need to sit there and not only win, but you need to look good, because if it does come down to a bunch of teams who are 9-1 at the end of the season or 10-0 or what have you, you better have the most impressive resume, and it's not going to be a case of, well, who's playing the best ball come November. You need to do it from day one. So it'll be interesting with that case, especially too when you sit there and you see teams wanting to get young players going in terms of getting them out there, getting them their 4 games before the red shirt season kicks in or whatnot. Do you leave starters out there a little bit longer? Let's just let's fatten that lead out a little bit more. We need to make sure that committee who's going to meet in Grapevine or over Zoom calls, who knows, come November, we need to leave them as much positive tape as possible.
And I know Steve said that this season will have an asterisk by it, but it won't for the team that hangs the banner that they won the national championship. It won't for the players with the rings, and it won't for the coach who gets the $175,000 bonus or whatever. The team that wins it is going to view it as a real national title, and they're going to take it just as seriously as any other that the NCAA has or the CFP has or any college athlete has. They're going to view it as a well-earned, legitimate title. And are you going to see a bunch of 70-point games while trying to protect players? And I think more and more it just points to we need more than just 4 teams in the playoffs. And as I think I've said on the show before, these last 3 months have shown us that we can accommodate and change quickly, and maybe we can do the same with the playoffs. And then once you go to an expanded playoff, you're not coming back from it. So maybe now is the time to rip that Band-Aid off and at least go to 8 teams.
I mean, hell, UCF has the greatest asterisk fake national championship, and they got a parade at Disney. So, I don't think anybody's really going to complain if they're the last one left standing at the end and be like, well, it's somewhat degraded or fraudulent or anything along those lines. Rings are rings and trophies are trophies. And again, people will not remember it at that point. I mean, only people that truly hate the team that won may sit there and hang on to it at that point, but it'll become an accepted national championship regardless.
Coming from the Dodgers fan from 1981.
Hell yeah.
World Series.
I mean, we've only had one since then, and that was 88, and it's been a long drought.
And as Kevin said about
I had to dump out for a minute.
Steve, we'll do a one-on-one show later, just the two of us.
Okay, make up for it. Yeah.
The only thing, there are only really 2 conditions I could see, general conditions in which the championship would appear tainted, and that would be if some school outside of the 5 or 6 that are expected to compete for the national championship won a national championship, and there would just be this thought that there's no way that Utah would have won the national championship if we wouldn't have played this crazy season like this. Or if there just happens to be a situation in which the scheduling format in that particular conference or just comes to some kind of dead end of the calendar and they get caught in some kind of odd configuration of somebody playing 7 games and somebody's got 10 and somebody somehow gets a playoff berth that seems tainted in some way because of playing less games, or they missed the Ohio State, Penn State game, or the Clemson, North Carolina, or Georgia, Florida game because of that, and something like that. But to your point, all of you, will there's going to be a semblance of a season. It's not going to be perfect. My argument is that it's never perfect anyway in regards to selection for a national championship playoff, and nowhere near it. And so why is this that much different, or what we'll see as a result?
Mark, let me give you a scenario.
Go ahead.
Let me give you a scenario to see if this would be a tainted title. Based on the NCAA's guidelines, which come from the CDC, they recommend 2 weeks of quarantine after you come into contact with somebody who tests positive. So say Ohio State in the semifinals beats up on somebody, but the defensive end on that team has faced both Ohio State's offensive tackles and has sacked Justin Fields a couple of times. That guy tests positive, and now Ohio State's starting tackles and starting quarterback have to be in quarantine and will miss the national title game. So is that, it's next man up, and you shouldn't, you lose a backup, you lose a starter, and Ohio State has shown that you can step in with somebody with a backup or even a third team quarterback. But is that tainted? It wouldn't be for the team that wins it, as I stated before, but I think a lot of other people would look at it and think, well, yeah, you won, but the starting tackles were out and the starting quarterback was out. So what did you expect?
I've got one other point on the playoff, and then Steve's going to sharpen up our analysis on Tegra. So to Kevin's point, what I want to see, so I always want to see chaos. In this particular situation, let's say we play no non-conference games. I want to see the SEC put in a situation in which, by any reasonable, logical deduction, should be left out of the playoffs. Meaning, let's say there are 3 undefeated teams from the other conferences at 10-0, and the SEC champions 8-2. And I want to see the college football playoff selection committee put in that position.
Just means more. It just means more. Their wins mean more.
The SEC would get 2 teams, only 2 teams in that scenario.
Because they carry the 2 means 2 teams, and that's they're I know we can sit here and we can joke about it, but it would really take Armageddon to happen for the SEC to get left out. I mean, it is what it is, and I think the sooner that we just all come to accept that, we can all go about our quarantined and masked lives.